Here's our book, Rosa, which is a new book by Nikki Giovanni. When we design an activity like this, the first step is to talk about the historical event and the characters involved, why they did what they did. Mrs. Parks sat. So we read books that help us get familiar with, in this case, Rosa Parks and also the other characters in the story of the bus boycott. "Not Mrs. Parks," Mrs. Robinson exclaimed. She then looked furtively around. "Pass the word that everyone should meet me at my office at 10 o'clock tonight." When I choose books about the civil rights movement, I'm looking for stories that emphasize resistance and action on the part of African Americans, that show that African Americans are in leadership roles, and I also look for stories that emphasize groups of people coming together to work together. If they were caught at the college, they could all be arrested for trespassing. But they were working to undermine a vicious law. They decided they would stand under the umbrella of courage Rosa Parks had offered. When I focus book discussions after reading about Rosa Parks, I try to get at issues of noticing injustice and not turning your back on it, but deciding that you, with others, can do something about it. What do you imagine an umbrella of courage would be? Kylie?
When you stand under the umbrella, you have courage.
I've included many language arts lessons within the preparation of the play. Bryden?
If other people stand under the umbrella, they have courage too.
Metaphor and simile, sequence of events, motivation, and oral language skills like speaking and listening. We're going to write a poem together about Rosa Parks, and it's going to need some two-syllable words to keep the rhythm. And then I've included lessons on syllables, on spelling, on rhyming and pattern in stories. Gino.
Courage.
Courage. Is that a two-syllable word, everybody?
Yeah.
Courage, okay. The next step is assigning roles. I made sure that there were enough characters in the story so that every child was an individual character and knew her or his name and history. Then I thought about the children and the characters and tried to make the matches. So now you all know what character you're going to play when we act out the story of the Montgomery bus boycott. And you know that all of you are very important to the story because it wasn't just one person who made the law change and ended segregation on the buses. It was thousands and thousands of people working together. So last night's homework was to talk with your mom and dad about what your character might say in your scene. Developing the characters became a homework assignment that children worked on with their parents. And so this is an example of that assignment. I asked this child, who is Rosa Parks' grandfather, to think about what he might say to Rosa. And he and his mother worked together on this paper and thought of things like you should study hard, trust your heart, believe in yourself. And you can see when you look at this writing that both the adult and the child have written on this paper. So you can picture a family gathered together working on this assignment. I'd like to hear from some of you what it is, not when I'm preparing the children for the reenactment, I ask them to talk in class about those family discussions. Matthew.
My sister was giving me a lot of ideas, and then I just choose one. Let's go to work.
Let's go to work. Kiara.
When my sister Michaela, she was in this, she was in this classroom, she remembered the Rosa Parks play and she told me about it.
Gabby?
I remembered when, what my grandma used to say to me.
We create posters advertising the boycott because that's historically accurate. The Women's Political Council created enough flyers to let the whole African American community know about the boycott. But I also want children to think about what language they'd use themselves. I know you're working hard on your posters. We want to make sure we know how to spell the words you're going to use. We generate a word wall to help children with unknown words. We figure out together what words they need and how to spell them. So who has a word that they want to put on their posters? Tanner.
Boycott.
Boycott. I started the play with a chant because I know that historically poetry and music are central to the civil rights movement, and because they're central to my classroom and the experience of first graders here. I wanted the children to write as much of the play as possible, and so they contributed all the words that are used in the chant. We decided to use the circle shape because it represents people working together, and we could all be both audience and actors, whether it was our scene or not.
I'm Brandon. I'm the narrator.
I'm Brielle. I'm Leona, Rosa Parks' mother.
I wanted the students to introduce their characters so that it would clarify for the viewers who people were, and also to help ground the children in the character they were playing.
I'm McKellen. I'm Rosa Parks as a little girl. I'm Karen. I'm Rosa Parks.
There's more than one Rosa Parks for a couple of reasons. One is that I wanted to make sure I had parts for every child in the play. And I also wanted to give the impression of Rosa changing as she grew older because of the lessons she was learning from those around her. This is the story of Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott.
Rosa Parks grew up in Alabama during segregation. Segregation meant that
after the narrator introduces the play and gives us background information, the children in scene 1 stand up, and the child playing Rosa Parks goes to each of her elders that are in that scene, and they give her some words of advice and encouragement.
Rosa, love your family and yourself. I'll try to remember.
In this play, we're able to watch Rosa Parks growing up, and in the early scenes, she is roughly the age of the first graders. And so the first time we see Rosa Parks, she is a young girl learning from her parents and grandparents, much as the first graders are learning from their parents and grandparents. And she then walks to her younger brother and reminds him that these lessons are important for him as well.
Like most African-American families, Rosa's family believed in education.
Then the second scene in which we see Rosa Parks at school with her friend Johnny Carr and her teacher, Miss White, who is a white woman who came from the north to start a school for African-American girls in Montgomery.
Do whatever you can.
And we hear Miss White give words of encouragement to help her realize the responsibility she had as she was growing up. And again, that is an experience that is relevant and contemporary to first graders who are now learning from their teacher and their classmates.
When Rosa grew up, she struggled for her rights.
The third scene is an NAACP meeting.
Succeeded, and she joined the NAACP.
Rosa Parks is now an adult and a leader of the Youth Council, and so we tried to emphasize that by having her introduced to her first NAACP meeting.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here. We're having trouble with the buses. Black people have as much right as white people do to sit in the front of the bus. Have any ideas? I won't give up my seat. We should change the law.
Rosa Parks was tired of segregation. She made up her mind to do something about it.
When we come to the fourth scene in the play, the scene where Rosa Parks actually refuses to give up her seat, the narrator puts the empty chair in the middle, and then we see Rosa Parks take her seat. The narrator becomes the only segregationist who actually appears in the play by coming in and saying, "Give me that seat."
Give me that seat.
At which point all the people who have influenced her life thus far gather around her, and then she says no.
No.
And in the book that we read about Rosa Parks, it said that before she said no, she thought about all those influences in her life. So the children understand that. Then she sits by herself in that seat for several seconds to just emphasize the point that she was in that seat and determined not to give it up. And the narrator removes the chair. Then the next scene is the pass it on scene.
Rosa Parks has been arrested. Now
starting with the narrator, children pass on the message that Rosa Parks has been arrested.
Let's have a boycott. Pass it on.
Rosa Parks has been arrested. Now we can do something about the buses.
And what I'm trying to get at there is that the community didn't just rally to support Rosa Parks.
Now we can do something about the buses. Pass it on.
They'd been waiting for an opportunity to find the right case to challenge segregation. They felt that this was it, and so they were energized, and they came together that very night to plan what was, in the beginning, a one-day boycott, but in the end, a 381-day boycott.
When the African American community heard about Rosa Parks' arrest, they knew this was the chance to end segregation on the buses. In one night, they organized a boycott.
The next scene is the first mass meeting at which everybody comes together to organize the boycott. And some central characters to the story are introduced in this scene. We meet Joanne Robinson, who's the president of the Women's Political Council,
We have to make a boycott and put posters up around the
who has the idea for the boycott and gets the women to make all the posters and flyers.
We have to stay together as a group.
We meet Martin Luther King, who becomes the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association.
Do you have any ideas?
I'll use my building for the meetings.
Rufus Lewis offers his space as a meeting place and who also organizes the carpools.
Rosa Parks has been arrested. Now we can do something about the buses.
E.D. Nixon, the president of the NAACP.
Well, we should be able to sit in the front of the bus.
I said, let's go to court.
Fred Gray, who is Rosa Parks' lawyer and who takes her case to the Supreme Court.
Oh, have any questions? What if I get fired from my job? They can't fire us all.
And this scene is also important because we hear members of the community bring up some very real concerns like losing their jobs or not being able to take care of their children.
What if I'm not home to feed my children?
Do you want your children to ride on the back of the buses?
No.
And we hear the boycott leaders, especially Martin Luther King, respond to those concerns in a way that convinces everybody to participate.
Let's go to work, don't ride the buses.
At the end of the meeting, Martin Luther King rallies everybody to begin walking because we felt it was important to actually show walking, symbolizing walking to work over 381 days. And then the narrator ends by saying that the Supreme Court rules that segregation on the buses is illegal, and so the boycott is successful.
African Americans returned to the buses and sat wherever they wanted.
Well, I woke up this morning. And then on that note of success, we end with singing a traditional freedom song. So I'm interested in talking with you. Immediately after the activity, we have a discussion. I ask them how they think the performance went. I ask them what they learned by being the character that they played and by being in the play.
Act like they were that person.
I want to know what you learned from being in the story.
If you work together, it'll come out better.
And then we talked about what lessons we learned about our lives today and how we might organize in our neighborhoods or in our schools, in our communities, to try to correct some wrong or make life better in some way.
And I could have a meeting with my friends.